Did you know that Zoro was supposed to meet Luffy in an entirely different way than he did in the One Piece series? How about the fact that he might actually be related to one of the strongest people in the whole One Piece universe? Well, I found this out, and these are the 20 facts that I found out that you didn't know about Roronoa Zoro. Starting with the fact that Zoro might be an orphan. I say this as a might be because unlike the other Straw Hats who have confirmed either still alive or dead parents, Zoro's parents have never been touched in the whole of One Piece. They're not even brought up. A weird fact considering how important familial relations are to the rest of the Straw Hats. But that isn't the only weird relation that Zoro has, because it turns out that his master, perhaps his adoptive father, is actually an ally of the Revolutionary Army. During the post-Sabo, Ace, and Luffy arc, we can see that Sabo is taken to the Dojo village, which we actually know is the village where Zoro was raised, and Dragon can be seen speaking directly to his master. This is an interesting twist that might have larger relevance later in One Piece. How about also the fact that despite calling himself a free sword master, he has actually had 7 swords over the total of the series. That's right, 7. Most people are currently familiar with his current configuration of Wado Ichimane, Sendai Katetsu, and Enma, but he originally started with Wado Ichimane and had 2 basic swords. From there he ended up picking up Sendai Katetsu as well as Yubashiri, but he lost Yubashiri in Eni's lobby. From there he picked up Shishui by beating Ryuma's corpse, and then he was forced to give that back to Wano and in exchange got Enma. So he's actually had 7 swords over the total of the whole series. And while Wado Ichimane is the sword that he's most connected to due to its connection to Kuina, it's arguable that Sendai Katetsu is actually his sword. It's the one that most represents his personality, and it's the one that he chose and it chose him. But did you know this, that each of those blades actually has a personality? That's right, they all have unique individual personalities, and Oda on more than one occasion has actually drawn them with these personalities as people. Sometimes trustworthy, sometimes mischievous, but all rather interesting. It's also interesting that this also leads to what would have happened if Zoro had gotten a Devil Fruit. Oda had confirmed that if he was to give Zoro a Devil Fruit, it would have been the Uo no Mi model Seiryu to feed to one of the swords. While it makes most sense that this would be given to Wado Ichimane because it is his most loyal and companion sword, I kind of want to see what Katetsu would look like in it, because you just know it would be an absolute terror on the battlefield alongside him. While Zoro as a god in the later part of the series would be fascinating, it's interesting to note that his origins are also quite different from what they were planned to be, as originally he was supposed to be a lieutenant on Buggy's crew when Luffy met him. This obviously got changed and ended up making him the first person that Luffy ever recruited to his crew personally. So, you know, that's rather interesting, kind of changes how we look at his character, as he was not a pirate, but a pirate hunter. Speaking of Zoro's origin, did you realize the fact that his parents might very well have been from Wano? There's some interesting tie into this that ties into the Dojo Village's descendancy, because one of the master swordsmiths who actually created Enma was from there. So there's a high likelihood that other people came to that village from Wano as well, in particular Zoro's parents. This also ties into the very popular theory that he is Ryuma's great descendant. This is because when people noted how he was fighting Kaido, he seemed very reminiscent of Ryuma during that fight. This could also very well tie in with the fact that he was the first person since Ryuma to kill a dragon. Specifically, he even defeated it in the same way, cutting its head off mid in the air with his swords. Speaking of his swords, did you know the detail that Chopper can smell everyone on the crew and each person has an individualized smell? Well, apparently Zoro's is the smell of metal. Makes sense for a master swordsman. Not that the man could actually smell very good in general, considering he only bathes once a week. Thank goodness he's only one of 2 members that really do this on the crew, because my goodness, that ship would smell terrible if everyone on the crew did this. But of course, this does bring us to the fact that everyone on the Straw Hats is different, but did you notice there's one big exception between Zoro and the other members of the Monster Trio? Have you figured it out? It's the fact that he's the only normal human on it. That's right, because Luffy is a devil fruit eater, and in particular the devil fruit that he ate made him, let's say, exceptional, and then, you know, Sanji was genetically experimented on, making him into a superhuman. This makes Zoro technically the only normal person on the crew. He may have had ties to an exceptional bloodline, but he's still fundamentally only human and the only one in the Monster Trio. But a big reason for this might be the training that he went through with Mihawk, and part of that ties into the mystery of his eye. Ever since the time skip, Zoro has appeared with that mystery scar on his eye, but the funny thing is, we have no explanation for it. We don't know if Mihawk accidentally did that during training, or if it's some kind of intentional boost to his overall power. There is a large fan theory that suggests that he will eventually reopen the eye at the very end of the series, and it will make him extremely overpowered, perhaps because that is his dominant eye. Of course, all of these facts start to make sense and are viewed that way by the world government when you consider he is only one of 2 people who is a vice captain among the Supernovas. That's right, there's only 2 people who actually are subordinates in the Supernovas, the other one being Killer. This is kind of interesting, as both of them didn't start with devil fruits and actually had, competing roles among all the people on their crews, yet they were considered the most dangerous. To fit with this highly dangerous theme, Zoro actually has his own Jolly Roger. If he was his own pirate, Oda did end up drawing what would happen if he had his own pirate flag, and no real surprise, it ended up being a skull carrying 3 swords, 2 crossed behind and 1 clenched in the teeth, similar to his free sword style. And people also believe that if the Straw Hats were to break up into divisions similar to the Whitebeard pirates, this would end up being his flag for his whole division. And while given his skills that he may be a powerful division commander, it's likely he still wouldn't be able to navigate his own fleet even if he had one. All of these definitely contribute to Zoro's power, but actually one of the earliest seeds of it happened to occur early in the series, especially post Alabasta, where Zoro was given the initial bounty of 60 million. Now this technically makes him the highest bounty from the East Blue, especially a starting bounty, due to the fact that it's double what Luffy's was. And keep in mind, Sanji does not actually come from the East Blue, so he therefore does not get his $77 million bounty placed above Zoro's, because that would technically be a North Blue bounty. So Zoro actually might be one of the most dangerous people from the East Blue. Of course, you're still measuring that against Luffy and his insane power. But some of this power might also derive from Zoro's connection to the number 11. Number of his abilities and even his birthday tie to the number 11, him being born in November, and a number of his abilities actually add up to the number 11. In certain spiritualities, this is because the number 11 can signify strength and spiritual awakening. Quite fitting for somebody who calls himself an Asura, which is literally a demigod. That actually ties into the next fun fact about Roronoa Zoro. Many of his moves actually tie into religion, specifically certain Eastern religions, particularly Buddhism and Hinduism and Shintoism. This is because many of his moves are derived from a couple of key specific areas. Most notably, he tends to derive things like his multi-caliber phoenix, based on the ideas of different paths in life and different wants and needs, as well as the fact that many of his more animal-themed attacks can also be attributed to the different various spiritual animals that one comes across in various retellings and tales across those different religions and belief systems. This, of course, all really culminates in his 2 big moves. His Asura form, which is a form of demigod/demon in various mythologies in Eastern areas, because they essentially are similar to good demigods, but usually revolve around more humanly desires. Quite fitting to tie into Zoro, actually, and that leaves us our last one, where he pretty much declares himself to be the king of hell. This kind of ultimately ties in with Enma, as Enma literally means that in a variety of areas, and you can even see that across a variety of animes. Of course, it still makes him one of the more unique members of the Straw Hats, as he seems to fully embrace the idea of the underworld, a recurring thing that we'll talk about in a different video. So if you like this kind of content, why don't you go ahead and hit the subscribe and like button so we can keep making videos like this. And that, of course, leads to the last interesting fact you might not have realized about Roronoa Zoro, which is simply that, are you aware he's the only member of the Supernovas without a devil fruit? That's right, really think about it for a moment. All of the other members of the Supernovas all either started with a devil fruit, or, in the case of Killer, were subjected to having a smile fruit put upon them. Because of that, Zoro now retains the only person that didn't have one and still doesn't. This is arguably kind of fascinating because his bounty is so high now. He's probably the closest person to Roger in his original form, as Roger did not have a devil fruit either. This makes Zoro quite exceptional and worth talking about for everyone around the One Piece world. And that's the list. Did we miss anything that you think people should know about? Go ahead and leave it in the comments below. And while you're here, go ahead and check out this video on the way Egghead Island is going to end.